supported by Verso Studios, created locally and shared with the world.
Well, good evening, friends, and welcome to this remarkable gathering. My name is Bill Harmer, and I have the immense pleasure of serving as the executive director of this extraordinary Westport Library. Tonight, we are not only thrilled, but truly exhilarated to be hosting one of Westport's own, Melissa Newman. We're here to celebrate the launch of her extraordinary new book, Head Over Heels, Joanne Woodward and Paul Newman, A Love Affair in Words and Pictures. This is an evening of love, legacy, and a profound connection to the heart of Westport. Head Over Heels offers a fresh perspective on Melissa's parents, two legendary figures who graced the silver screen, the stage, and our hearts. It's a book that takes us beyond the celebrity status and puts Joanne Woodward and Paul Newman front and center, allowing us to explore their profound love story. Joanne Woodward and Paul Newman were not just movie stars. They were artistic collaborators, political activists, and philanthropists whose legacies continue to shape our world. They represent one of America's most iconic and enduring couples, and tonight we're going to dive deeper into their love story. With over 120 never-before-published photos, handwritten love notes, family treasures, and intimate moments, this book is a real testament to the enduring power of love. The images captured by renowned photographers are a visual journey through time, a glimpse into the private lives of two extraordinary individuals. Melissa's heartfelt gift to her parents is now a gift to all of us because Melissa will be signing copies of her book, Head Over Heels, after tonight's event, and we have copies available for purchase right behind us here in the wing of the forum here. So make sure you pick up your copy. Melissa Newman, or Lissy to her friends, is not only a talented writer, but also an artist, a jazz vocalist, and an educator. She has touched lives through her art, her music, and her teaching. Tonight, we are fortunate to have her share this intimate and personal journey with us. Joining Lissy in conversation is Doug Tirola, an award-winning director and producer whose documentaries have captured audiences worldwide. As the artistic director of Westport's remarkable theater and president of Fourth Row Films, Doug brings his unique perspective to tonight's discussion. Doug is also a longtime friend of the Westport Library, having served on the library's Book for the Evening Committee now for over 20 years. So without further delay, what do you say we bring Doug and Melissa up to the stage? Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.
Thank everybody for being here. Before we start, I had a quick question. Who when Melissa's father was alive and ever met Paul Newman in town or ran into him, or has a Paul Newman story?
Oh, look.
So we're gonna switch with you and just listen to your stories?
Which often happens.
Yeah. So, Melissa, let's start. What was the inspiration to do this book?
I think originally we started discussing it about 10 years ago, and my friend Andrew and I, Andrew Kelly, he ended up being my co-creator. We had discussed it, and then I hadn't seen him in a while, and we reconnected. I asked a friend of mine, I said, so what's Andrew like to work with? And she said, man, you set him in motion, and he's a terrier. And we reconnected over this book, and it was kind of our COVID project. I'm gonna take my glasses off because I can't see y'all. All right. So we reconnected, and I think the inspiration for the book was the fact that I felt like people were forgetting my parents. And, you know, there's so many people that say, oh, it's not true. But honestly, I'm the kind of person that a while ago I made these stickers of my dad's face. My friend Jermaine West, who's a graffiti artist and an artist, made these amazing stickers, and I started handing them out to people, and I had amazing experiences where I was giving them to a lot of young people, a lot of people that would never know anything about my dad, and sure enough, none of them did. And I would hand them out, and I would say, you know, well, look him up. And I would give them a few clues. I would say, he was number 19 on Nixon's enemies list. He was the oldest man to win a nationally sanctioned auto race. He's in the Guinness World Book of Records. And he almost ran for the Senate. And they would say, you're not gonna tell me? And I would say, nope, not gonna tell you. Good luck, ask around, post it on social media, and then the doors to the subway would close. And a couple of times I had one guy who turned out to be a filmmaker, and the doors closed, and he just went like this. It was great.
So before this book is great. I mean, it's beautiful. I love what you write in it and how you curated it. Could you tell us how you chose, or what is the story you're trying to tell through this book?
I'm thinking of all the things that I didn't say about the last question you just asked. And let me just finish up there. I told you it was gonna go like this. Don't, you know, just drop the reins, you know, but no, I'm kidding. One thing I was gonna say is about the documentary that came out, the Netflix documentary, if you haven't seen it, it's good, it's really good. It's Ethan Hawke's crazy thing, you know, which I love, because that's removed from me, but I thought it was really successful. We had tried to get somebody to do a documentary about my mother, and we couldn't get any traction. Yeah, which is really, yeah, right? What? What, Alex? What? So anyway, so this was something that ended up, I think the documentary did a really good job. A lot of people ended up coming up to me and saying, I had no idea about your mother. So I think it really did, it worked to do that job. This book, the biography that came out, I think they just chose a really dark narrative, and
What I felt it was like it had you explained it, but that it's really a love story, and I wanted to maybe you could share with us how your parents met a little bit, and then how they made it to Westport.
It's an interesting story. I felt like this book really celebrates the most, you know, the most beautiful aspect of their union, which was just the wonderful, complex relationship, and also because most, you know, people don't take pictures of you when you're having a knockdown, drag-out fight, so the pictures are all really lovely. Although there are some really, really funny quotes in there. So what was the question, Doug?
About how they fell in love.
Oh, that's a story. This photograph on the cover of the book was taken by a man named Stuart Stern, who wrote the screenplay for Rebel Without a Cause and Sybil and Rachel, a lot of films that they were involved with. And he met my father 12 days before my father met my mother. And he fell madly in love with my father. And then when my mother came along, he was incredibly jealous. And then he and my mother ended up becoming best friends, really connecting because of the, over the difficulty of loving my father. Like that was what connected them until the day he died at 93. So this photograph is taken in about 1955, 1956 on a trip to Vermont. There's a whole, inside the book, a whole contact sheet. And it's beyond. You just can't, you know, it says everything about why my father, who was married at the time, to someone who, where they wanted to sort of escape the Midwest and ran off together, and it was probably never going to be what this ended up being, which was like it's like a snowball rolling down a hill. It was one of those you can see it, and it was bound to happen. So this is actually during that time, and you can kind of tell.
When did their story take them to Westport, or how you?
Well, that's jumping way ahead. Let's see, because this is 55. Well, they came to Westport. They bought the house that I live in 1961, and my husband and I bought it from them when our son was 2, and he's, oh, you're doing it. Oh, good. That's our house. Yeah, and they moved across the river to my grandmother's house. But so 1961, I basically lived in that house on and off my whole life. But back and forth to California, from California to Connecticut. I think my guess, and this is just a guess, is that during this time, as they were doing a lot of theater in New York, my guess is that they probably trysted together, and I'm guessing it was at Silvermine Tavern, because I think that was really what those rooms were for. And I think when Silvermine Tavern closed and sold off all of its amazing, if you looked at the hotel cards, you saw, Errol Flynn, and it was quite extraordinary. So I think my guess is that. And then when Westport was really just hugely artists and writers, and I think they wanted to get away from Hollywood. I think, from what I remember from my childhood, they were surrounded mostly by artists and writers. It was artists and writers. It wasn't actors necessarily. And when they sat around, their closest friends were writers. Stuart Stern was a writer and a screenplay writer. Frank Corsaro, who was around, was an opera director. James Costigan was a writer. It was all about artists and writers, and not about glossy. It's really about making art, forging art together. So that's pretty spectacular.
Well, that's one of the things you say. They had these artists and writers as friends, and when you look at the book and you see all the contributions of photographers, it's the dream team. So obviously some of their friends were well-known photographers. Could you talk about the images that you chose in here, and who some of the people that took them?
Well, evidently people like Bruce Davidson and Philippe Halsman, and there were people that seemed to live in our house. Philippe Halsman, there's an extraordinary number of pictures of my father in shaving in the bathroom. And there's pictures by Stuart Stern, which is understandable. So he was in the bath. He was watching my dad shave. That's actually Stuart's hand. You can see him taking the photo. My dad is wearing a bracelet that they had matching bracelets. My parents gave Stuart a bracelet. It was during the early times, and it just said on the back, "From the Bobbsey twins." But so there's also pictures, I can't remember who. Philippe Halsman, there's one of Philippe Halsman taking their picture. There's one of, I think there might even be a picture from Gordon Parks of him, my dad trimming his mustache. So I don't know what that was all about.
Richard Avedon?
Richard Avedon never took pictures of my dad in the bathroom that I know of, but he did. There was a picture of my mother. There was a magazine, there was an Esquire magazine. We actually had the cover framed in our house, in my parents' house, for a long time. A wonderful picture. And it was a whole series of my mother after she won the Academy Award for Three Faces of Eve, or maybe even before she did. And one of those photographs, there was Milton Green, there were several by all these different photographers, and one of them was Richard Avedon. And Andrew and I knew that we wanted that in the book. So for some reason the Avedon Foundation couldn't find the negatives for it. And I said, would it be possible that we could just put the magazine in? And they said, as long as you make it obvious that it's a magazine. And I said, well, that's perfect, because that's exactly what I wanted. You know, something that would have a little difference. So they allowed us to do that. So that's actually, if you can see in the book, that's a beautiful, beautiful portrait by Richard Avedon of my mom.
So you talked about in the book how you inherited this love of nostalgia from your parents. You keep a lot of things, and when you were growing up, there were pictures.
It's called hoarding. Yeah. When you live in the house you grew up in, it's like, I literally sound like my mother, because there's stuff there that belonged to my sister's boyfriend in high school. And I'm like, can you guys get rid of this stuff?
But so what did it feel like as you're going through all these pictures to choose this? And it sounds like you've always been surrounded by images of your family.
We were just talking about this today, that it's so interesting. There are walls like this everywhere my dad ever lived, that he would just walk around with nails in his mouth and a hammer. And every time a new photograph showed up, and they've kind of morphed, but most of those were in my house. And I'm just gonna say, I say this in my essay in the beginning, but that picture of him as a cowboy and that picture of my mother, how many people grew up in a house where there was a photograph of your mother wearing nothing but fishnet stockings and balloons? What? There's my little sister. I looked and I was like, yeah, that's the one. Yeah, did you ever think about that? Did you ever think of, like, we didn't think about it. It was just one of the pictures that was there. But for a while I lived in a house where the only two pictures of my parents were that one, and people who didn't know me would come in and they would say, who are these people? And I would say, they're my parents. And then I just wouldn't say anything else. Yeah. That's my dad look at that, popping a wheelie on a motorcycle. That's me down at the bottom. Clay is in there hiding her face. That's my son, Henry. I know, now I'm gonna get all wrapped up. That's my mom after she cut her hair off with fingernail scissors when she was in her very first movie, Count 3 and Pray, where she plays a gun-toting tom girl whose name is Lissy. And I just was watching a little bit of it. I'm like, I'm spot on. But she knew that they were going to want to do a foofy 1960s. You know how they would make, like, oh, she's a tomboy and she lives in a cabin in the middle of nowhere, but she had hairspray and a hairdresser, and she wouldn't stand for it. So right before filming started, she cut all her hair off with fingernail scissors. And the studio got really mad, but she stuck by it, and it's a much better movie. That is Stuart Stern standing next to a little Victrola in his little suit with his collar when he was a baby. All right, sorry, I digress. It's like we're standing in my house. That's what standing in my house is like, actually. If you came over, we'd be standing there doing exactly this.
So to get to know, for people that don't know you, what would you say, what were you like as a kid growing up here? And what was growing up here? I mean, I know you went back and forth, but could you talk about your childhood?
Yeah, I went back and forth from Connecticut to California, and any young person who knows anything about fashion or was ever young or was ever in middle school knows that, you know, once I bought the right Fair Isle sweater, and then I would finally sort of get it, and then I would go back to California, and, you know, so basically what I'm saying is I had no friends, and I was friends with all the girls that were like me, the misfits, and I went to Coleytown in first grade and third. I went to a school called Oakwood in kindergarten, second, fourth, 10th, 11th, and 12th in California. I went to 2 schools in 1 year. I went to Long Ridge School in Stanford in the 6th, 7th, and 8th. I went to there's one that's in nursery school now, but originally went up to 8th grade, learning community. Originally went up to 8th grade, and they said, you don't have to do anything, like you could just go there. And that's what we did. And my parents went in, and so Friday we were there, and Monday I was standing in the middle of a field hockey field at GFA, panicking and wondering what happened to me. So like that. So yeah, so no friends, dogs, and lots of time in the woods.
And how would you describe the Westport you grew up in? Or is there anything you miss?
How many people, if I if I started a club of crotchety people who are like, I remember Westport when, and I think, raise your hands if you would join that club. Westport is amazing. People are like, Westport is amazing. I'm like, yes, it is. But there's so many of us that are like, but Sally's Records and the Remarkable Bookstore and yeah, we do the rabbit hole. All you have to do is say Remarkable Bookstore, and then 3 hours later, after you've gone through the Black Duck and just for the record, I'm tossing it out. Anybody who likes jazz, VFW Thursday nights 7:30. The lineups, New York lineups. I swear to God. $15, and I'm seeing people there that I see in the city in New York that I pay $50 to see. So, all right, that's my shout out.
And Melissa sings there.
Once every 6 weeks. You don't even have to come see me. Go see Amina Figueroa this Thursday. Mind-blowing pianist. She's absolutely lovely. Okay, sorry, I digressed.
So in the book you mentioned this, and you have before, that people think of your dad as a sex symbol. But he's always talking about how your mom, I think one of the words you used was vixen, and unleashed this side of him. Even though I think one of the quotes you pulled in the book has to do with your mom says, I don't talk about my acting process or sex because they're both magic and I keep my secrets to myself. But maybe you could talk about the intimacy of the relationship, because your father talks about it.
What's interesting, somebody said something about that. Okay, I'm not even looking at what's happening behind me. This is, all right, wow. Okay, somebody said something about his playfulness. I think it might even have been a review about the book. His playfulness contrasted with her cool patrician beauty. And the fact of the matter is that it was kind of the opposite, that my father considered himself to be really bourgeois, and my mother was the free spirit that he longed to be. And I don't think I realized, until we started going through transcripts and so on, that my mother was the, well, I don't think I realized it until I reached into a bag that was about to be thrown away at my mom's house, because we'd gone through all the attics so many times. And I thought, okay, well, there's nothing in here, and kicking a dead mouse out of the way, as one does in an old house. And stuck my hand in the bag and came out with basically the first 10 letters my dad ever wrote to my mom. And they had stuff in them like this. And I found them and I thought, oh, we can put these letters in. And then I would read down the letter and I would say, oh, this is so, and then I would say, Dad, there they are. Literally reached my hand in and found those. And when I say, they weren't salacious, they were charming and naughty, but really charming and so sweet. And then the next day I would go up there, and these are, and Clea knows what I mean. Like, we think we've seen everything, and stuff just appears out of nowhere. These are a stack of telegrams that were all congratulations to my mother for winning her Academy Award. And that's not even, it's a stack. And also, my friend Jerry Graham is here taking pictures. Round of applause for Jerry Graham. So, One of my favorite things about this book is that Jerry Graham she took all the contemporaneous pictures. She had so many great ideas. We had so much fun together. So now Jerry Graham gets to be in a book with Richard Avedon and Philippe Halsman and Gordon Parks, and that delights me every time I think about it. She's gonna be embarrassed. She's gonna kick me later. She's gonna be like, "What? Why are you talking about me?" She's a great photographer. If you ever need anything, headshot, anything, where she is, she's like lying down on the ground now. Okay. Oh, Jerry, just own it. Come on, she's brilliant. Jerry Graham. And is Andrew, are you here somewhere? He's okay. Can I have a round of applause for my friend? He's gonna die, he's gonna kill me. There's my partner, Andrew. If anybody ever needs to make a gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous book, I had seen art books that he had made, and I was so lucky that I knew him because I knew the right person for the book, and I couldn't have been happier. I don't think Dan Miller is here. I think he's coming to New York when I do something in New York, but Dan Miller designs. Andy introduced us to Dan, and Andy and Dan and I were like the three musketeers. We actually took a room up here. We had a huge table, and we spread all the photographs out on the table, and just, I have to say that even to this day, every time we turn a page, we still intake of breath. We still, it's just, we had such a good time. I think Andrew said it best. He said, somebody asked him, how was it working with your friend Melissa? And he said it was the best work experience he's ever had. And I have to agree. And even Little Brown said, we've never seen three people work so well together. So we just had. Can I talk a little bit about just making the book, too?
Yeah, that's
okay.
what...
Was that the question?
Well, no, you avoided it like your mom apparently did about talking about a certain...
Oh, was it about the sex thing? Oh, my God, yeah, no. Okay, just so for the record, we'll go back to that. Okay, so just a little story. I think I have it in my book. Okay, this is that little plaque. My dad loved putting plaques on things that says women I like to sleep with, and that was on the wall, so... So their bedroom has two doors. So there's it's like a barn door that closes, and then there's another door that closes. And I remember when I was little thinking, why would anybody want two doors on their bedroom? And one of them literally has a bolt on it that you have to slide. And I can just remember running into their bedroom and flinging myself in between them, and now that I have kids. Anyways, yeah, evidently my mom was really she was the one. Because my dad, yeah, he just said, Pandora's box,
So let's go back to the book then for...
Oh, okay.
When you were finding these pictures to bring together, did you have a story in mind that you were looking for pictures to fulfill, or did just going through these pictures create a story?
First, I'm just going to say Stuart Stern. The only thing Stuart Stern loved more than my dad was cows. And that's completely true. And so, all right, so when we decided on to make the book, we talked about this and we thought, well, how are we going to structure it? And we said, Andy said, well, nobody wants to watch your parents grow old in a book. So we tossed out chronological. And it was actually Andrew's idea to make it loosely thematic, or he said, let's just make it an art book. And so we decided to make it loosely thematic. And to me, that means that we have juxtapositions. I think half of the fun of making the project was that we juxtaposed photograph with photograph in a way, and text with photograph in a way where it's not necessarily readily apparent why these things go together. Some of them are very obvious, but some of them, I always think the moment between the time that you say, huh, and the moment you say, oh, that that moment in between is when the things go in. And so I think there are a lot of moments like that in the book where you think, like why did these things go together? And some of them you may just say, I have no idea, but we worked really hard on flow, and the flow is there, is absolutely there. And I think when people are paging through the book, they tend to want to turn the page because it's not, you never know what's going to be on the next page. And I think also for short attention spans, I mean, that was just lucky that, for short attention spans, it really keeps, and I've had the comment when I've looked at the book with people where I always say, I have to look at the whole thing, not while I'm sitting here, and everything. And they just keep turning pages, and then when they get to the end, they always say, that's the last page? So that, I feel like that's a really good, that's a good sign. But, so yeah, we thought loosely thematic, we thought art book, and I think that's what makes it unusual. And I think by the time you finish looking at it, you really feel immersed. And I think you really feel like you've been sort of on the inside of their relationship. And when I thought, well, what do I have to bring to the table? Everybody's done a book about my dad, apparently. There was a photo book happening when Andrew and I were working on the book. Someone else was making a book, someone else was making a book, someone else was reissuing a book. Everybody jumped on the bandwagon, and we thought, oh boy. And I think that obviously because I'm on the inside, because I have, and Andrew also was well acquainted with my parents, spent a lot of time with them too, so that was nice. But anyway, so yeah, loosely thematic, and one of my favorite things about the book, and I have to put down my mic, I hope I don't feedback or anything. All right. I have a really loud voice so you can hear me. Stop laughing. Okay. So we could have had a fancy, linen cover and everything, and that would have been very, very elegant. And I said, absolutely not. It's about the book. But one of my favorite things about this book, and this was my idea from the start, is that you can hear me. Oh, it's for your. I'll hold it. Okay. Sorry, I forgot we were recording this. I just thought I was in my living room. So one of my favorite things about the book is that when you take the jacket off, there's nothing but net, it's just that. So it becomes almost like a sculptural object. They could probably hear me even because I was shouting. Hold on, let me put it back. But very happy about that. All right, you're right, I got it. You're sure you're giving me the right one?
I hope.
Okay, good. We're gonna mess them up. Let's switch. So that was one of my favorite things about the book. I love when the cover comes off and it just becomes this sculptural object. I've never made a book before, and I was, thank goodness I had Andrew, because he has made several gorgeous books. So it was absolutely amazing. And when they first arrived, I couldn't believe it. They came in a box, and I thought, I made a book.
Is there, I know it's unfair, it's like asking someone what their favorite scene in a movie is, but is there an image that you, either because of how it looks in the book, or the journey to find it, or just something we could look for when people take the book home?
Absolutely. There's a picture by Lawrence Schiller, and it's of my mother, and it always hung in a back stairwell. It's of my mother and my dad's lifting her skirt up like this, and she's being very coy and holding the skirt down, and my dad just has this goofball proprietary look on his face, and there's just something about that says so much about their relationship. And just in a story, Andrew did most of the legwork about, getting, getting rights to photographs. It's scary when you're me and you say you want a book about your parents, because all of a sudden you have deadlines and money being thrown at you, which, if I break even, I'll be happy, because we had to pay a lot of money to get the rights to most of these photos. And when we called Lawrence Schiller to find out if we could use that photo, I said to Andrew, I said, he made so many phone calls, he negotiated, he did such a good job aside from helping design the book and everything else. He did so much legwork, finding quotes, it just incredible. We had so much fun. But anyway, so he talked to Lawrence Schiller, and I said, how did it go? And he said, well, you know, he's older, and he said, I'm not sure, you know, if we're going to be able to work it out. It seemed like it might be complicated. And I said, you know, he said he was lovely, but I said, well, could you try one more time? And he called him back the next day, and I said, how did it go? And he said, I had the most amazing talk with Larry Schiller on the phone. He said he never would have been a photographer if it wasn't for your father, who promoted, you know, helped to promote him and helped to support his work and believed in him, which was such a lovely story. And he cut us like a really good deal on photographs. And as it turns out, Andy and I always said that when in doubt, it was by Larry Schiller, because there's so many photographs in the book by him. If we hadn't secured that, the book would be really different. I would say he and Stuart Stern are probably two of the more important, in terms of the book, photographers. And Philippe Halsman, who evidently just lived in our bathroom somewhere.
So in terms of the story of your parents, what, I think one of the quotes in the book has to do with they were actors and they were in love. So what, I mean, I know some of your experiences is your parents are actors, but do you take something away from what it was like to be raised by actors? Like what made?
My favorite quote in the book. We couldn't put the photograph that we paired it with, which I think was Andrew's call. I'm giving him tons of. She's probably getting so embarrassed. He deserves it. I mean, but the photograph that goes with it, I'm not going to tell you. But we were pleased. We were pleased with ourselves. With a lot of the combinations, we were like, oh, we are so clever. So that's really fun. I'm sorry, question was?
What was it like to be raised by actors?
Actually really amazing, because I think we all in our family, we have a really intimate understanding of what actors do and what the process is like. And, you know, having seen lots of different people and seen people in the house, our parents doing a lot of theater, I think, was really crucial to that understanding. I think my parents were huge fans of theater. I think they imparted that to us, that we, in our family, were always raised to think that theater acting was, it would probably be too strong to say, but theater acting was real acting, which is, and films and television were something entirely different. Although films and TV are so different now, but that it's such a different. It's what you're doing is so incredibly different. It's almost apples and oranges. So, and then my mother, when my dad did Our Town, and the story about that is that my father was giving my mother a hard time about she didn't like to fly and she's afraid of thunderstorms, which she was. And she looked at him and said, "You haven't been on the stage in 30 years. And it was like the gauntlet was down, and that's how she got him to do Our Town. He couldn't not. And then he went on to do, it went to New York, and it was, it went really well. Started out at the Westport Country Playhouse, of course. Can we do a shout out for the Westport Country Playhouse? This is a wonderful thing that my father said about the Westport Country Playhouse, and with meaningful eyes, I'm going to say, he said, it's like your ball team. You don't just go when they win. You sign up for the season, and you go. And if you have an opinion about what they're doing and you want them to hear about it, you tell them, because this is your theater. So I feel like a teacher up here. I'm like, so take that in deeply, because it's a really important part of the community, and it can sort of be whatever you want it to be, but you have to go.
I think we're, that's awesome. Well, I know that we're getting toward the question.
No. You guys aren't going home yet. I'm not.
So
they're going to be like, she wouldn't let us leave. It's tomorrow already.
But so in the book, you have some quotes where your dad, I think one he talks about an argument yelling every few months,
right.
And you've talked about he talks about coming and going. What was it like to grow up around a couple that's so passionate? Because obviously there was this passion there that caused, some of the great quotes that are in here.
Right.
Could you talk about that?
Really scary. My mom was really tempestuous. Their relationship was really complicated. What's amazing to me is, and you can see the beginning of it here, and then you could see, there are pictures of them, there's a picture of them kissing, and they're young, and it's early in their relationship, and I thought, that looks exactly to me. I know that kiss, but when I think of it, I imagine it with my mom, in sweats with gray hair, and my dad sitting in the chair with his beard and his gray hair, and it's the same kiss. So what's fascinating, and I think what this book shows, is the thread of continuity. But my mom was really tempestuous, and anybody who has a dramatic parents knows what it's like to be in a house when your parents are angry at each other. And I always thought my mother was so incredibly articulate when she was mad, until I realized later that mostly she was quoting Tennessee Williams. Unfair.
Well, that's it. When you go through the book, it feels like you're telling your parents' story, but I felt as you as the writer or the author, putting the creator of this, that you're trying to say some things that transcend this. At least that's what I took away from it. Could you talk about, is there messages that you want us to take away from this book and therefore from your parents' story?
I think it's one of those things where you create it. It's like a piece of art often happens with a piece of art where you create it and then you see what the message is after you create it. You put it in the world, you put it on a table, and then you say, huh. And so that would be more, we were so immersed in the act of making it. And I think, it's the power of connection, it's the complexity of relationships, but mostly it's just a yummy book about a love affair. And I think it'll also make a really good Valentine's Day present. I'm just saying, we're gonna get like a second, we got Christmas and we got a Valentine's Day. Okay, now that was it's so weird to be in promotion mode. I'll tell, and I really am, like, it's weird, because I'm usually in my kitchen, doing laundry, or I scrubbed all the mold off the doorways. You're like, living room smells, and I was supposed to be doing something for the book or whatever, and I was like, but I have to do this first. Oh, I had something really good to say, and I
You said
forgot
yummy.
what it was.
What's another yummy part?
It's I don't know. I'm super pleased with it. I just think it's every page I still look at it and I still enjoy it. And I think anybody who cares about them or cares about Hollywood or cares about romance or likes interior design or fashion is going to oh, wait, one story. This was a story. Okay, so I made these little cards with QR codes because I have children, and they showed me, and they did that for me because they're young people. I don't even know what a QR code is, basically. But so I have these beautiful, beautiful little business cards with a picture on one side and QR code on the other. And I was in a restaurant. This is about being in promotion mode. I was in a restaurant with my husband, and I saw two men sitting there, and there was a young man in his 20s, and he was wearing a cravat with a tie pin, and the other, much older man had round orange glasses and was very elegant, and I thought, these people need a book. And so I literally walked across the restaurant with my card, and what's freaky is that this is not the only time I've done this. I walked across, and I said, since you are such extraordinary sartorialists, and I just am looking at you, and I have a funny feeling that you might. I made a book about my parents, and I've done this a few times, and people are like, "Get away from me, creepy lady." But these guys, so I put the card down, and I said, "I'm just vibing that you're gonna like this book." So I went back and I sat down, and on the way out of the restaurant, they walked by, and they just looked at me and said in their Italian accents, "We just bought the book." So you're gonna see me with a little red wagon.
So I told you I would ask you this lightning round sort of question. When you talked about the Playhouse, and when we were both doing something to help the Playhouse, you pointed out that if you go to where the actors enter on stage, there's a piece of wood from the original stage that. Can you explain that I think your mom had demanded that there be this thing so people could step on this piece of wood that all these legends had before, that sense of history. So what I wanted to ask is if someone wanted to take a Newman family tour of Westport, what are some other places that you or your family sort of cherish here that we could go to?
They're all gone.
No, they're not. No, they're
Chubby lanes.
So you can go to McDonald's.
I know. Was that where it was?
It was.
Yeah, Chubby Lanes was.
Oh no, it's the Willows, right? It's the children's.
No, we all went to Willows. Or with Dr. Beasley.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like the aspect of.
Well, the Playhouse, and that we have the Newman Poses Preserve behind our house, which shout out to the Aspetuck Land Trust. If you're not a member, they do a lot to preserve land. So a lot of the land that I roamed on behind their house. And the nicest thing was that when my dad passed away, they said, well, they want to name Main Street after your dad. I'm like, yeah, but like, he didn't go to, he didn't buy jewelry and ladies' underwear that often, and he just went to Mitchell's a lot. So I said, if you really want to do something, if you want to preserve the Poses property, and I was shocked because everybody just went, okay, and then they did it. There was like one guy who was like, nah, there's always like one guy, but basically it was unanimous. Can I just say quickly, yes. Rachel filmed it's a film that my dad directed. This is what films, my dad always said that this is what movie making was like. It was like an indie film before indie films were indie films. And movie making that he liked were movies where you would all work together all day, and then you would barbecue together, and you would talk about the work, and you would get together over the weekends, and it was just this was a real love affair. People that helped make this film worked for nothing. Dee Allen, who was a very well-known film editor, edited this film. Everybody it was just a labor of love for everyone. This is a picture of my dad, and I read in transcripts that Stuart Stern, who wrote the script for it, and they filmed it in Georgetown, all around. So very, very local, because everybody just wanted to come home after work. So my dad didn't want to film this scene, and Stuart and Dee Allen were yelling at him, saying like, no, Stuart's like, I wrote it for a reason, it's there. And my dad's like, I don't know, it doesn't need to really be in the movie. And I say in my preface that I think he was just jealous. And I think this is like, he's like, don't touch her there. You can touch her there, but don't touch her there. I just think this picture says so much about that.
Are there any other films or do you have a favorite film of each of theirs or that they collaborated on?
My favorite film used to be A New Kind of Love, which is I'm going to say it. Someday we're going to show it here, but it has to be shown through the lens of a feminist perspective, which means there's going to be a lot of yelling. But we'll set it up, and it's about a very self-actualized woman who then becomes a simpering, feminine makeup and whatever. And the reason they made this film is my mother was like, she brought the script in and told my dad, read this, and he read it, and he said, this is the worst piece of dreck I've ever heard in my life. And then she said, yeah, I want you to make this movie where I get to wear fancy clothes, and I raise the children, and you won't do it. And so he said, I changed my mind, it's the best thing I've ever read, and they did it. And I love watching it, but I watch so many of their films, and I'm like, oh my gosh, in the light of modern day sensibility, it's difficult. I saw, there's a really interesting film that my mom was in called, very early on, called No Down Payment. And it's a wonderful, crisp, black and white indictment of suburban living. And Tony Randall's in it, and it's sort of obscure, but it's really wonderful. Rachel is extraordinary. And for my dad, The Verdict, hands down, it has to be the one, it's the one where he came to work and, was it Sidney Lumet, right? Sidney Lumet said, he came to work and the first day and he said, Paul, this is fine, but it's surface, and if you really wanna dig, I think you can find this person if you want to bring your personal experience, and it depends on how much you want to show of yourself, but this could be a really great performance, and what you're doing now is adequate. And so my dad went home and he thought about it and worked on it, and that's really where that performance came from. It's really extraordinary if you've never seen it. It's a beautiful, beautiful film.
So did everyone write those down?
Yeah, No Down Payment. And The Verdict.
And did everyone hear that she's gonna show a bunch of her parents' films?
Yeah, I would love to do a film festival someday.
I think
it'd be really fun. And my idea is that you do a pre-talk. They'll put a timer and they'll haul me off the stage. But that you do a pre-talk and you set up the film and then you watch it, rather than watching the film and everybody wants to go to sleep.
Awesome. They tell us that we need to open it up for questions soon. Is there?
Yes.
Is that okay?
I have nothing more to say.
Awesome. So does anybody have any questions?
Please come up to the mic if you have a question, so all the people at home that are watching can listen to your question.
I'll call on my wife. She met Paul at Heyday and tells that story every time he's on TV, but someone else should go.
Oh, thank you.
Hey, Lissy.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. So I'm curious to hear, what is it like to grow up with parents that are not only famous, but your parents were extraordinarily famous? What was that like? How did that feel? How does it feel now?
What's really weird is that, I don't even think my kids really understand. When I say to them, Taylor Swift, Taylor Swift famous, yeah, they were really, well, my mother's star was just in Ascendancy. She won her Academy Award in 1957, and then my dad quickly eclipsed her and spent the rest of his life trying to convince the world how spectacular she was, hence a lot of the films that they did together. It was weird, we would go to Paris and we couldn't leave, we'd try to leave the hotel and people would be chasing us, and it's very weird, very strange. And when you're 5 and you know that there's one little trick in your pocket that'll make all the adults in the room just whip around and give you all the attention, and it really messes with your ego. Look at me right now. I feel like such an imposter. Except you guys are all my neighbors. I just have to let you know that I thought, oh, should I put on makeup? And I was like, no, these are all the same people who see me at Trader Joe's. I'm not going to even bother. But yeah, very, very strange for ego development as a young person, trying to figure out what that's all about, because people are looking past you, through you. They're even using you all the time. And it makes it very odd to figure out what your relevance is in the world, because honestly, we all know the height of mental health is that no one is thinking about me right now. That's where I want to be. But I was also raised in a really weird way where, yeah, people were often thinking through me or around me, and yeah, very, very strange.
Would you, if you were to meet somebody whose parents were equally famous, there's in Westport?
That's my kitchen. We have the sink. We just replaced the faucet last year. I was really upset. I was like, can we keep the sprayer? And they're like, no, it doesn't work anymore.
But you know, actually, because it's so, could you talk about the story about Sylvester Stallone going to visit your dad?
Yeah, it's in my, okay, Sylvester Stallone evidently came to the house for a meeting with my dad, this house where I live. And we grew up with pots and pan leaks all over the house. My parents were artists, you know, like it's so weird. I just remember pots and pans were like, they were just there. And our house is probably the smallest house on the block now, which is kind of crazy. And we had a tumble down stone wall with, you know, the people would be driving 4 miles an hour, and we'd have people in the yard taking pictures of our house. We just had nice dogs. We had a stone wall that was this high and no gate, you know? And this was the height of my father's fame. Question was...
When Sylvester Stallone came.
Sylvester Stallone, okay, this is Sylvester Stallone story. He came for a meeting, and we knew the guy that drove, I was probably like Parks driver service, so we're driving, we were friendly with all the drivers, and he told us the story that when Sylvester Stallone got in the car, he looked at his guys, and he said, someday Sylvester Stallone's gonna come to me and go like, that never happened. He said to his guys, who would ever think Paul Newman would live in a shit box like that? And I said, I'm really tempted to have it just like chiseled over the doorway. I take pride. People walk into our house and they get it, or they look a little panicky and they edge towards the door. Like when people would pick kids up from, you know, parties or whatever. Like some of the parents were like, I love it here. And kids would, I love it here. And then other kids, and it looks very much the way it did. It really doesn't look that different. A lot of the furniture, a lot of the, you know.
Well, because your experience would be different. Is anyone gonna?
Oh yeah, there we go.
Let's
Good.
go. Oh, sorry.
Hey.
Thank you. Melissa, I've got a question of, your parents were in town and lots of us ran into them, different places, you know, restaurants, coming in and out. Your dad opened the door for me one time at Brooks Brothers. I'm wondering what they thought of people, because sometimes we would say, you know, sometimes I would say something to them and sometimes I would just be polite and not say anything. Yeah. But did they ever come home and talk about the people that, you know, what was that like for them, getting all this input?
Honestly, I think that for the most part, we felt that Westport took really good care of us as a family, and that my parents felt that Westport took really good care of our family. I think that the feeling was always that, you know, the town was really respectful and almost protective in a really, really nice way. Obviously, there were outliers, but by and large, I would say we really felt as though the town really understood, you know, how to be respectful of the family.
A lot have been written about your parents, and I'm sure a lot of it's been recycled. What have you looked at and said, that's not right, I want to set the record straight on that?
She laughs uncontrollably for a really long time, and then there's silence. Oh my gosh, I mean, there's everything. My favorite, you know, even on my Wikipedia page for me, they have me conflated with 2 other Melissa Newmans. Like, people would say, like, I loved your work in Bonanza and on Perry Mason. And I was like, God, I was like 3 or something. And but I kind of like that because it kept me on the down low, and now somebody's fixed it and I'm kind of mad. My son's like, it's called disambiguation. I'm like, can we re-ambiguate me? So what was the question again?
Well,
say it again.
About your parents, so much has been written and I'm sure recycled.
So
what do you look at about your parents and say, that's not right, and you want to set the record straight on?
I think you just have to let it go. I think you can't, I've learned, when I was standing in line, I met somebody at my cousin's wedding, my niece's wedding, who, after I was having a great discussion with her, informed me that she worked for the National Enquirer. Yeah. And so I said, Well, we could have a discussion about this, but it's important to understand that, that whole thought about, famous people, they asked to be famous, and my parents asked to be actors. They didn't ask to be famous. Everybody in the back of their mind, I think my mom knew she was going to be famous, but I just think that I said to her, when my father was dying, and I was in the supermarket with my children, and I had to walk by these, pictures of my dad where they had sneaked and, taken pictures of him in his wheelchair and stuff like that, and they were on a cover of the National Enquirer, and I thought, why? Why? Is that really necessary? He's done a lot of really lovely things for the world, and he's not a bad person, and why do you need that? So, and there's so much of it. I think what you learn is that you just let it slide, because you'd be correcting all day. Yeah.
Hi, thank you. This is so wonderful. So I grew up, my parents adored your dad, and I remember watching Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and became aware of your dad when I was little. And he became a massive, big movie star. I saw the Netflix documentary last year, and I got to know about your mom, and I found so much I had no idea. Right? My mom suffered with Alzheimer's for 17 years, and I want to ask about yours. That must have been horrendous, that kind of decline. So I just connect with you on that, and also wonder how, is she with us? How is she? And
she's with us.
Hey! Well, God bless that.
She's the Energizer Bunny. My mother was diagnosed with dementia a year before my father had cancer. And I'm really convinced that my father said, I'm getting cancer because I can't. There's no way. And I always, and I think Clea would back me up on this, that we always felt like mom was really strong and mom would be fine. If my dad passed first, our whole lives. And that somewhere in the back of our minds, we kind of felt like our dad would fall apart if our mom passed first. And so when she was diagnosed, I really honestly believe that, that he checked out. There was, it happened for a reason. And I know that happens frequently. People don't think they can make these decisions, but I think sometimes they do. So she's doing really, really well. She has caregivers that are angels from heaven. I have like family. Most of them are from Jamaica, and I have my husband and I literally visited, just the two of us went and visited one of her caregivers, and shout out to every single one of those people. We're so lucky. And we're so lucky that we're able to, she's next door. We get to visit her all the time. My husband goes and reads to her like 4 times a week. So she's busy. All things considered, she has a full life. But yes, absolutely, it's really difficult. And the one thing I'll say is that we're incredibly lucky that we have the resources. And I know people that have had their parents, on the couch, and the children, and people do it a lot of different ways. And the way that we're able to hang with my mom is the way everybody in should be able to, but can't. So we know how blessed we are.
Well, because they're telling us to wrap up, but right before this, there was a picture of your dad at the hotel in Vegas.
Oh yeah.
And this is perfect with your mom. So maybe we could go back to the beginning of their story as we before we go sign books.
This is the picture that when we felt naughty in high school. This is the picture that made us feel worse. But as I just realized that it's not naughty, I think my dad took the picture, and I think it's a different look than the one I thought it was. But we always looked at it as like she was, anyways.
Thank you very much for your time, Lizzie and Doug. And we're going to have everybody who wants to have their book signed to line up starting here and make a nice, neat line.
Do you want to say goodnight to everyone, or anything you want to end with?
I'm just going to say that was my dad on his morning of his wedding. Enough said. Thank you all so much for coming.
Maybe slightly blue. Slightly hungover, maybe slightly blue. I never